Hi, I'm here today with my friend, with my one of my, I guess I call you service provider because I voted with my wallet with you, so
Mhm.
that's always good to say. I went first, and also just a real inspiration and collaborator around the whole kind of storytelling and knowing yourself and how to know and relate that to yourself. And I am with Rain Bennett, who is a filmmaker, a keynote speaker, a consultant. What else would you call you? What else would you brand yourself as?
Just an all-around awesome guy.
He is.
One thing I would add to that is new to my multi-hyphenate,
Repertoire.
yeah,
Yeah.
my repertoire is a storytelling coach. That's something that I started doing this year or last year rather because of the pandemic. I was speaking a lot prior to that. Pretty much all speaking gigs stopped, at least in-person ones in 2020. And so I started working with people virtually one-on-one to help unlock their stories. So that's something I've added, which is used a combination of the skills that I had acquired from filmmaking and writing and speaking, but has really been impactful for me and my clients. I love it because
Yeah.
I really get excited when I see light bulbs go off in someone else's head. And if I helped initiate that or was the catalyst, that's such a great feeling.
Well, when you
Well,
said that, go ahead. Go ahead, Ray.
I was just gonna say, like, I took your workshop. I think it was in August, and I still feel like the the energy from that
Oh,
in the
that's
work and
awesome.
the way that I'm approaching. Like, I think back about that experience. It was like what 3.5 hours that felt like 5 minutes. It was sort of
Oh,
like this
that's a
timeless
compliment.
experience that I felt like I could have been there for like 5 more hours, just gobble, and it took so much, and there was so much that you had to share that it just touched me on so many levels that I felt like at that point you had asked the question during that, like, tell about a time you felt stuck, in your life. And I was like, I'm in the middle of that right now. And I don't see a way out of it. And there was something about telling that particular story to you at that time and then taking that back out with me. And like what I kept saying to myself is afterwards is like, how do I get unstuck? How do I get unstuck? And it was my mantra for like, a couple more months. And now I feel like I've gotten beyond that place. But there's a lot of power in like just telling a story, even if you don't want to tell it, or if it's a hard
Oh, yeah.
story to tell. So being able to tell the story can help, you get from one level to the next level in your journey.
Absolutely.
Wow, what a testimonial! I didn't see that testimonial coming.
Yeah, I'm going to need that video clip, please, sir.
No, seriously,
No, thank you.
we'll take that clip out. That is
Honestly, that means a lot. And as a filmmaker, Rinnie, that's such a great compliment. The thing you said about 3.5 hours feeling like 5 minutes, because that's the goal of any film. And that you can tell when something is dragging on, you're losing people. In a great film, even if it's 3.5 hours, like Braveheart or something, or The Godfather, you don't feel that way. You don't feel that way. And then some that are 2 hours feel like 10, and you're like, this could have been done in 80 minutes, So that's a great compliment. Thank you so much.
well. I was going to take all the credit for her not being stuck anymore, but now I realize you got to share it.
I just set it up, buddy, and you knocked it out of the park.
What the hell? A couple of A types roosters like us, man. We can get up there and peck each other forever. Whatever. I'm happy with the end result. I got the benefit of the end result and having Rinnie working with us, which is phenomenal. So anyway, as I was thinking too, is that like when you said storytelling coach, I thought, man, if that was ever a great thing for you to be doing, like that is home run center field. So
thanks, buddy. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Mazel tough on doing that.
Thank
so
you.
We've interviewed you at least once or before, maybe twice before, and we have a lot of stuff about storytelling, but specifically, we've been in the Commonwealth talking about what I call creation myth. It's a term that I first heard with Kevin Clark, who was another one of our podcast guests recently. And you have another name for it, the origin story. And we've been kind of teasing out what that creation myth means in terms of telling your story, branding your company, capturing your passion, and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So I want to hear, I'm just going to kind of lead with that and tell me what that term origin story means to you, why it's important, and anywhere else you want to go with it.
It's incredibly important. And there are lots of terms for that. They're all the same thing. In business, they call it the founder story, the origin story, which is kind of like the superhero version of that, right? The origin myth of how Superman became Superman. And I love the creation myth. It's all the same thing. And why it's so important is we can't really clearly know where we're going to go or where we should be going if we don't really know where we came from and how this whole thing started. Think about the creation myth of Earth, you know, understanding how all these beautiful things came together. That's why people are religious, because that's why that story is so powerful and connects so many humans, because we understood how all these things have come together to create the world in which we exist. It's incredible. Your story can be like that too, but not unless you go back to how it all came together. Here's the problem. Most people don't do that. Most people aren't self-aware enough to know why they took the action that they took today. Why did I get so upset about that interaction I had? Why do I really feel that way about this? Most of us don't even ask ourselves those questions, and that's a problem. And that's with anything. I think being self-aware is the first step to achievement. To achieving our goals is being self-aware and asking ourselves questions, even more so when understanding our paths, our journeys. So you need to go back and pull all this open and look inside. And it's not easy. You have to be vulnerable. Sometimes it gets messy. And a lot of us are afraid to do that because of all of those things. But you have to understand the way to put it together in a way that makes sense. So many of us go forward and work jobs that we don't love, or we don't even know how we ended up there. And we do things that aren't aligned with our values and our purposes and aren't heart-centered. And that's because we haven't done this kind of work. And so there's a science to storytelling. There's a reason why neurologically it works, but there's a whole lot of heart and art behind it too. And that is crucial to understanding your path forward. Crucial. It's imperative.
So I'm probably jumping ahead here, but if I told my creation myth 6.5 years ago, before I met Julie, it would be a totally different story, and I would have highlighted totally different incidents to draw the conclusion of where I thought I was now. Mm-hmm. And now I could turn the jewel, and I'd have a totally different creation myth, get into a different story. So I totally resonate with going inside, the self-reflection, the vulnerability, and the soul searching and everything else. How do you know what to look for?
That's a great point. I will take this moment to say to those listening, this is a very important thing to know. You do not have just one story. And terms, I'm going to give the flip side now of the benefit of creation myth and origin story. Terms like that sometimes make people think that, oh gosh, I got to get this right. I got to get this origin story right. Here's the thing. You don't have just one story. An origin story or a creation myth is a type of story that you have. You have not just a lot, you have countless stories to tell. Your whole life is nothing but a huge bank of stories that you can pull from. Your origin story could also differ. It depends on what you're trying to do now. So what do we look for was the question. Well, it's what your goals are right now. Dave, to your point, it's ever evolving. Now, I'm not saying you should change it every month, but here's the thing. We rebrand ourselves all the time. We start doing something new. This path leads to another path. That's the beauty of life. That's the beauty of storytelling, is it leads you somewhere and you follow it. So your story definitely could be different than it was 5 years ago. Maybe because you've learned more about yourself, maybe because you're doing something different now. My story 5 years ago was a lot different than it is now. And that's because I've tapped into different values that I'm aligned with, and I have a different purpose, a different mission that I'm trying to achieve. So what you look for is that end goal. Now we're going to get back to the science of it. Where am I going? What am I trying to do? i.e., who am I trying to impact and how? Once I identify that, I need to go back to that beginning and see, okay, how did I get there? An example would be, I was in the fitness space for a long time. I made a movie about it. And for a good chunk of years, it was a big part of my life. I had a side hustle teaching classes and personal training. I made a film traveling the world about this fitness culture. I was deep into it. And that was that was my story. If I was to tell my origin story about that, I would go back and tell the story of like, I was always an athlete. I thought I was going to be, you know, a pro athlete, but I wasn't. So I started teaching people boxing and yada, yada, yada. Well, now I'm understanding that the way I really enjoy serving people is through storytelling. And I still have love and care for health and wellness, but I do it through this storytelling thing. I believe that storytelling is the way people connect most effectively. And that's how we build things that we want to build, is through those connections. So now I go back and I open it up and look and say, okay, well, how did I get there? What's the line? It wasn't by chance. I didn't just pick it out of thin air. Like, I want to be a storyteller. It's also always been a part of me. I just have to trace that line back. Here's the thing. Like characters in a story, we are all multifaceted, multi-layered, multi-dimensional. So you don't just have one you. There's not one Dave and one Rinnie or one Rain. So you still got to track it back. So to answer your question simply, to know what to look for, you have to know where you're going, and then you can trace it back.
Okay, so that's great. And that I say, if there's a point one, if I was putting these up on a board, so your story, it's like, you know, the end, you kind of know the end chapter. Okay, at least
what you want it to be, right?
You got the end chapter, but then you're going to write another chapter, another chapter, another chapter. But at least you got the last chapter you've written so far. And then you're going to kind of like reverse engineer or go back and figure out how you got to that chapter. So it seems, one, you want to be able to choose something. How do you choose the chapter? How do you choose the most authentic, powerful, encompassing chapter, you know, now last chapter, to be able to create the right creation myth to connect to it?
Yeah, well, you want to focus on what's going to be relatable. What are the parts of your story that are going to relate to the people you're trying to impact? And mostly that is struggles, obstacles, problems, conflict, right? That's what people are going to, we resonate with each other and we relate to each other through the experience of shared struggles. Oh my gosh, I know what that feels like. I lost my dad too. Boom. We are connected, even if I've never met you before, right? More importantly, we resonate with people and we get inspired by them, and we connect with them and latch onto them by seeing how they overcame that or are overcoming that currently. So you don't even have to have that part of the story finished. Okay. So that is the first thing. Now, also, when you know where you want to go, you know the ending, deciding where the beginning is of that story, the origin, should be the opposite, because stories are about transformation. So if you know that you want to be lean and mean and to have lost 50 pounds, if you're in the fitness journey, then the beginning of your story should start, picture yourself at the end of the story. How do you feel? Oh, best I've ever felt in my life. I'm happy. I can hold my kids and go play outside. So what's the opposite of that? That's where the beginning of the story is. I was 50 pounds overweight. I hated looking at myself. I couldn't even play with my kid at the park. Oh, now somebody's connected with you, and now they're going to go on this journey of transformation of how you got to that happy feeling where you're 50 pounds lighter. Obviously, this is just an example, but that's the thing. We're looking for transformation.
Okay, and as I'm pulling this out, again, thinking about the Commonwealth meeting and everyone else who's watching this, is you kind of pick out what the next, kind of like the current final chapter is, who you are, who does you want to embody, the purpose that you have. Mm-hmm. You want to highlight the journey with struggles, shared struggles. You know, I think we talked about in sales, we call it feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. Mm-hmm. I felt that way myself. Let me tell you what I found.
Boom, that's empathy.
Yeah, that's empathy. And then also, it's like before and after. You want to do the before and after picture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what storytelling is. I was here, and there was a problem I was having, and now I am here. And then the great part of the story is, how did you do it? All that stuff in the middle.
So here's one I wouldn't ask anyone who doesn't have your depth. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, so I can go and create a sales story, mm-hmm. which makes me look very good, which I want to. You know, I want to put myself in the best possible light. That's part of the reason I'm hiring you to help me get a story that sells. And I also want a story that's authentic. I could pick lots of things that make me look better than I actually am, but they wouldn't be authentic. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to ask this question. I sure as hell wouldn't know how to answer it. Where does authenticity fit into this?
I think authenticity is everything. Here's the thing. People are getting really, I don't know if it's fed up with maybe untrustworthy of experts, because the current modern day experts or gurus are kind of what the current advertising folks were, 10, 20 plus years ago. We don't like ads anymore, and they're still around, but that's when authenticity and storytelling got so important and popular in our marketing, because we realized, like, I'm sick of being spam. Now that we're on the internet, it's everywhere. Emails, banner ads, and you're sick of it because somebody is being pushy. They're interrupting what you're doing to sell something to you. So we started to understand.
It's a trespass.
Totally. It's a violation. Absolutely. I love that word, trespass. Absolutely. Instead, the good marketers started understanding that if you tell good stories, you're actually pulling them in to believing you, pulling them into your sphere. It's not forcing them to buy your thing. It's saying, hey, here's a story about how we use this product to help people like you, or are you interested? And they'll lean in if they want to. That's the difference. That's heartfelt, heart-centered, right? Similarly, we're in a space now where influencers and experts and gurus are everything. And the tide is shifting. People are getting sick of that because they're tired of people from up here on a high level saying what you should do. And it's not true, because we all have different paths. You can have success being super chill and laid back. You can have success being hyperactive and hustle hard mentality. There's not one path. So what people are looking for is, what is your unique approach? What's authentic and uniquely you? What's unique about your perspective on the way my business works, or the way the world works? Now we're starting to get to that authenticity aspect of storytelling, because what they want, they don't care if you're an expert. There's a lot of great people. Let's take all right, we've been talking about fitness today because of my past. Fitness, personal trainers. They're all over the place. There's a million of them. People don't hire you because you're a great personal trainer, because there are great personal trainers everywhere. They hire you because of your unique approach, perspective on the subject. Well, I think that strength training is the best way for women to get in shape, not walking on a treadmill for an hour, whatever that is. And that speaks to them. That's how you create a relationship with your clients, customers, and communities, instead of just, it's not transactional, it's transcendental. It's like, now we're partners in this journey. So authenticity is everything, because I think, and it's turning right now, storytelling, you have to be authentic. So I've been on this for a while, but I'm witnessing it in the media and social media now. Like, people are starting to have this aversion to expert speak, and they're really starting to be attracted to people just saying, well, here's what worked for me. Here's my story and how I experienced it. And that's like somebody on your level, right?
So there's a couple of things here that are really critical. I mean, in the right way, like critically important, not critical. And one of them is that I do think there's we have this Web Squared program that for helping Black entrepreneurs. And we have a radical different, in a way we're starting from a position of true unity and equality. Mm-hmm. You have to start from equality and end up at equality. So there's something here. I think this whole hierarchical way of thinking of things it's showing its limitations in so many ways. And I think what you're talking about is the fact that people don't want to be lectured to, people don't want to have experts, people want to be able to be fully into themselves, and that's true equality. Yep. So anyway, that's more of a sermonizing.
Well, that's a great point, because let's talk about that for a moment, about diversity and helping Black businesses. Is, for the longest time, people that look like you and I were the ones on the panels talking about, here's what you should do if you want success, if you want to achieve this. Well, that may have worked for us, but not necessarily for someone else who has a different life experience, who comes from a different background. That's why diversity is so important, not just for diversity's sake, but because we're all diverse. We all have unique paths, right? And so there's not just one answer. And so what a white man has historically told us is the way forward isn't necessarily true for a woman of color. And that's why it's so important to be authentic. Hey, here's what worked for me, but I'm not by any means saying that this is what works for, will work for you or work for everybody. That's why we need to relate to the person who we're learning from or who's guiding us. And the way to create that empathy, that relatability, is 100% through stories.
So this gets to the second piece, because again, I'm piecing this out of knowing where you want to end up, picking stories of struggle and triumph, and that in the before and after. And I think one of the four things, and again, this is just how I'm turning the jewel, I know it's not the whole formula, is that there's something unique, there's something that you do that nobody else does.
100%.
And that's your value proposition, because then people can't, you don't have any competition, right? Nobody can be Rain Bennett. There's other story coaches or whatever it is, but nobody's got what you got. Nobody's got the life you got. No one has all this stuff. No one talks from diversity from the point that you have a Black wife. You know, it's different, so different from that situation. So one, you know, it gives you market advantage, but two, then there's something about, like, to me, that's the highest and best story you could tell. If you start from what is mine that nobody else can do, to me, and I think, oh, I've landed on the right final chapter.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. 100 times yes. And that is the point of the creation myth, is not like, how can I tell the story of how I got started? It's there, but back to what we said about people being, or not being self-aware rather, is that a lot of the times we don't even realize why we got there. And I love the point you made about other story coaches. Absolutely. I have a podcast called The Storytelling Lab about storytelling. The people who I have on there are people I look up to. They're my mentors in the storytelling space. And essentially we're competitors, because some of them are storytelling coaches too, but we're not, because I don't do what they do and they don't do what I do. I don't serve who they serve and they don't serve who I serve well. And the only way I know that is because I did this work to tap into, well, who do I serve better and why better than anybody else? What led me there? And you got to go back, and I actually help people through this in an exercise that I went through this exercise myself that didn't really have a name about 3 or 4 years ago, but now I call it finding your unique intersections. It's literally what we're talking about, Dave. And this is the process of seeing where my skills, my passions, and my experiences overlap, and what's in those lanes. Rinnie, I know we did this in that workshop you're talking about, and it's so helpful for people because they don't understand how they all work together. And often people even struggle with it because they don't see how they overlap. And so you just got to kind of dump all these life experiences out on the table and see where they start to match up. And then this beautiful image will start to emerge. I always equate it to a jigsaw puzzle. You know, if you were to take one piece out of the bag at a time and try to put together a puzzle, it would never work. So what do? You throw them out on the table. It gets really messy. You scatter them around so you can see them. And then you start to see, oh, here's a corner piece. Here's a bunch of blue ones that go together. Now I'm starting to see how it goes together. Same thing with this. And that's why it's hard, because we're pulling on stuff that happened when you were 5, buddy. We're pulling on things that you may not want to like bring to the forefront, but what they may have done is they may have changed the way you view the world. They may have informed your thesis. And that's the thing. I think we spend so much time trying to find our purpose. And what we need to be doing is trying to establish our thesis, our belief on the world and business and life. And then we can determine what our purpose is with that. But we have to understand, what is your unique belief on the way the world works? Then the path will reveal itself for you.
It's funny. And I'm going to, and Rinnie, I'm going to close here. And if Rinnie, if you want to ask something too before we go, is that the podcast series is running a business from the heart. And you just answered in a way, or confirmed, that running a business from the heart is kind of knowing the answer to this question, is what's mine. If you're doing what's uniquely yours to do, then you can't help but run a business from the heart. And if you're not doing it, it's probably not from your heart. Mm-hmm. So there's just a beautiful intersection of our businesses here. Rinnie, is there anything you want to ask Rain before I plug him? You give him a chance to plug himself, not plug him like kill him.
Yeah, Rain, I'm an artist and I create through visuals, painting, and
I remember.
So there's a storytelling that's happening that's beyond words. It's in color and texture and shapes, and I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. Like,
bring it.
What what are your thoughts about like storytelling outside of just words? And I don't even know how to ask the question.
Oh, you
I got it.
Perfect question.
I got it from here. I got it from here. Listen, you're in such a great place. Humans don't communicate in words. They communicate in images. They always have. What's the first language we ever had? We drew it on the cave walls. We still do. So effective communicators. I have a client on Thursdays that I have a rare cancer foundation that we do a live show called Luncheon with the Experts that hosts a doctor in this rare cancer. And today's guest was so good, and it's clear he has 30 years experience, because when he explained high-level concepts of this rare cancer to patients who just got diagnosed and don't know what it is, he gave them visuals so they could understand how it works. He was talking about things lighting up on the CT scan, and just because they're bright doesn't mean they're huge. It could be like seeing a train light and it looks big, but it's just bright. That doesn't mean it's bad. And so my point is, the great communicators communicate through imagery, through images. And if you can't use images, then you use words that make images in the audience's minds. So you and I, because I'm an image storyteller too in the filmmaking world, are in a fortunate place. Now, let's talk about art. Have you seen someone in a museum before stare at a wall for hours? And there's no words there. They're looking at this image. They are transcending something there. They are in another world. You cannot tell me that image is not telling them a story. It's a story that's hit them in their hearts. You see that all the time at museums. Yeah, imagery is everything. So you're in a really fortunate place, because that's how we connect more than words. And our words are only good if they create pictures in our minds. So yeah, images are everything for humans.
Great, thank you.
Great, Rain. So Rain, who are the people you most love to work with, and how can they find you?
Absolutely. So this has emerged this year when I started doing the storytelling coach. I've worked with nonprofits. I worked with small businesses. I've worked with, organizations. Now I tend to gravitate towards entrepreneurs, small business owners, and now people with their personal brands, because it's usually people tasked with the things. This is why I'm uniquely me and do my service. Because when I was making my documentaries, it was just me. I had no crew, no fancy equipment, no money. So that's the skill set that I developed. So I help people when they don't have big teams. I'm not out there producing Nike commercials and things like that. I'm helping small to medium business owners, entrepreneurs, and personal brands tell their stories effectively and efficiently by not worrying about the tools and the gadgets and gadgets and the cameras and the apps to use, but rather harnessing their skills, specifically storytelling skills. So no matter what they have, if you have this, you can make impact and be effective. Lately, I've been realizing that I'm really good at helping people unlock their personal stories that will launch their brands, whether it's a business they're created, based off of what they do, like me, or just their personal brand. And that's something that a lot of people resisted for a long time. And I think they're starting to realize, myself included, how important it is, and that you have a personal brand, whether you know it or not, or whether you cater to it or not. There's a story out there being told about you. You choose whether you want to have any contribution to that or not. So I've been helping a lot of people do what we talked about today, which is like go back to the beginning and how I ended up here. And so that's where I've been getting the most value out of the people I've been helping recently.
And how do they find you?
Yeah, so rainbennett.com is just the easiest place. All my handles online are at Rain Bennett. There's not a lot of us out there, so I'm pretty easy to find on Google. But at my website, I offer a free weekly newsletter. It's a storytelling tip every Monday morning, and examples and ways that you can use it in your Rinnie's nodding her head because I think she's a subscriber. So that, rainbennett.com is the easiest way to do that. And starting in March, I actually have a course for people who can't afford me as a coach. I have a course that I'm going to launch in that same vein of helping people unlock that story that helps them launch their personal brand.
Yeah, and there's something that occurred to me too. I want to end with, because you do high-end professional stuff. I mean, the stuff that we recorded was like, whoa, that's professional.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like the guerrilla, you know, you're like the guerrilla storyteller guy. You know how to get in there and work with whatever resources people have to do it. So you've got it bracketed, man. You put beautiful quality stuff out, but you're also just an expert at making the most out of less. So
Thank you. Yeah.
can't recommend you highly enough. And I'm just really glad that Rinnie and I are both thrilled to have you in our world. Thanks for what you're doing for the world, what you've done for Rinnie, and what you're doing for our business too.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye.